A powerful CEO boards an international flight expecting just another routine trip, but when the flight attendant leans in and quietly says she's his daughter, his entire world flips. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The warm overhead lights inside London's Heathrow Airport glittered against the polished floors, reflecting the buzz and bustle of travelers rushing to make their flights. Oliver Cunningham, 54 years old, poised and widely known as the CEO of Cunningham International, strode through the terminal with the same confidence he displayed in corporate boardrooms. He was a man accustomed to VIP lounges and private jets, yet tonight he was catching a commercial flight to New York for a series of last-minute deal negotiations. His schedule had been uprooted by unexpected business developments, forcing him to settle for a first-class seat on a major airline rather than one of his usual private charters. Oliver's footsteps echoed with a brisk click across the gleaming floor. His personal assistant had taken care of the boarding pass and luggage check-in, sparing him from the inconvenience of standing in lines. He preferred operating on precision, building his life on efficient timetables and meticulously planned schedules. Yet, as he approached Gate C-21, he couldn't shake off a faint tug of nostalgia. Commercial flights reminded him of his humbler days, back when he was still forging alliances and trying to convince investors to take a chance on his fledgling tech company. He remembered lugging a battered briefcase, heart pounding with both ambition and fear, dreaming of the day he would conquer the market. Now, with a multi-billion-dollar enterprise under his command, those memories felt distant. He handed his boarding pass to a smiling agent and proceeded down the jet bridge, stepping aboard the plane where a flight attendant greeted him politely. For a split second, Oliver paused. He sensed something in the air, like an unspoken current of tension. Then the moment passed as he moved to his seat in first class, nodding politely when another attendant offered to stow his carry-on. From behind him, a soft voice rose. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Cunningham." It was the usual courtesy, but something about the way she said his name sounded oddly personal, as though she held a secret. He turned, expecting to see a familiar face, but the attendant had already moved on. Settling into 2A, Oliver inhaled deeply and exhaled in slow resignation. This day had been a long one, filled with back-to-back meetings in London. He had parted ways with a major European investor who'd nearly slipped through his fingers. At the final hour, Oliver's trademark determination secured the deal, but it left him exhausted. Now, confined to the plush seat, he allowed himself a brief moment to drift, listening to the low hum of passengers finding their seats in overhead compartments slamming shut. In less than 15 minutes, they would be hurtling through the skies on a 7-hour flight, and by morning, he would be in New York, heading straight to another high-stakes negotiation. His eyes flicked open when he heard a gentle rustle by his side. A flight attendant, perhaps the very same one who had greeted him with that peculiar familiarity, was preparing to offer a glass of champagne. She was young, maybe in her mid-20s, with dark hair neatly pulled back into a bun. Her polished uniform fit impeccably, and her posture radiated professionalism. Yet Oliver sensed something uncertain in her expression, as though she was fighting to maintain composure. She extended the champagne flute, smiling. "Good evening, Mr. Cunningham. May I get you anything else before takeoff?" For a fleeting instant, he caught a hesitant flicker in her eyes. It looked like recognition or maybe an emotion she was trying to suppress. Oliver glanced at her name tag, but it revealed only her first name, Avery. He nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you, Avery. This will be fine." She stepped away, and Oliver found himself unsettled by that brief, inexplicable exchange. He tried to refocus on the folder in his lap, which contained numbers for his upcoming negotiation. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the quiet intensity in the flight attendant's gaze. He wondered if perhaps she was an intern from his office he had forgotten, or the daughter of some investor he had met at a charity event. Over the years, he had encountered countless people, from starry-eyed entrepreneurs to rival CEOs. Names and faces occasionally merged in his memory. That must be it, he thought. He took a sip of champagne and pushed the doubt aside. Soon the cabin door was shut, and the flight's safety demonstration began. Avery stood at the front of the aisle, demonstrating how to secure the oxygen mask, while another attendant pointed to the emergency exits. Oliver half listened, preoccupied by lingering business concerns. The plane taxied onto the runway, then roared into the night sky. Once it leveled off, the hum of engines became the steady background to in-flight announcements. Oliver slipped on his noise-canceling headphones to review a digital presentation on his tablet. But he kept noticing Avery out of the corner of his eye. She hovered near the galley, offering warm towels and distributing menus. Each time she walked past, her gaze seemed to stray in his direction before darting away. His instincts, honed by years of reading subtle cues in negotiations, told him something was amiss. Still, he couldn't decipher what. Curiosity gnawed at him, and he made a subtle plan to initiate conversation once the meal service began. When dinner orders were taken, Oliver declined the braised lamb in favor of a light salad. He'd learned to avoid heavy meals on overnight flights. Avery jotted his request on a small notepad, meeting his eyes for an instant. Her hands trembled slightly, enough that Oliver noticed. She pivoted to address the passenger in seat 2B, a middle-aged woman leafing through a fashion magazine, then glided back to the galley. Moments later, the cabin lights dimmed. A hush settled in first class, broken only by the clink of cutlery and the low murmur of conversation. Oliver powered through slides on his tablet, profit charts, product pipeline updates, forecasts for his U.S. expansion. He tried to bury himself in facts and figures, but a peculiar sense of anticipation kept him alert. Something told him that before this flight landed, the tension around Avery's demeanor would come to a head. He wasn't mistaken. 2 hours into the flight, after the meal service had ended and most of the cabin's overhead lights were off, Avery appeared at his side again. She held a bottle of water and asked if he'd like anything else. Oliver took the bottle, nodded politely, then hesitated. "You seem familiar," he began gently. "Have we met before?" Her cheeks flushed at the question. For an instant, she closed her eyes as if steeling herself for something monumental. Then she whispered, "I'm not sure if you'd remember me, Mr. Cunningham." She swallowed, summoning courage. "I've spent my whole life not knowing how to tell you, but I'm Avery Sinclair. My mother was Cassandra Sinclair." Oliver's chest tightened at the mention of that name. Cassandra Sinclair. A memory from decades ago surfaced. A bright-eyed intern in his earliest days, someone who had been assigned to help at a product launch event. They'd shared fleeting moments of laughter, overshadowed by the unstoppable momentum of Oliver's career. They lost touch, and he seldom thought about her after his company soared. But hearing her name now from this nervous flight attendant was like unlocking a door he hadn't realized was closed. Avery exhaled slowly, placing a trembling hand on the back of the seat in front of him. "My mother raised me alone," she said quietly. "She told me about you when I was old enough to understand. Said you were always chasing your dreams. She never resented it, but she never told you either. I'm sorry to spring this on you here, but I didn't know how else to—" Oliver felt the blood drain from his face. He'd had unexpected business surprises, betrayals, and setbacks in his career, but none of them compared to this moment. A daughter? He couldn't formulate a coherent sentence. His jaw tensed as shock, disbelief, and a wave of emotion battled inside him. Cassandra Sinclair. That timid but brilliant intern who once typed out his speeches and insisted on fueling herself with coffee late into the night. They'd shared a camaraderie that teetered on something more, but it never quite crossed the threshold, at least not in any official sense. Could he have been so absorbed in his corporate climb that he missed the biggest development of all? Avery's voice wavered. She never wanted me to chase you down, but I wanted to see for myself who you were. To understand my father. Her last word hung between them, crystallizing the truth that neither of them could ignore. Oliver let out a ragged breath, setting his tablet aside with a trembling hand. It didn't matter now that half the cabin was sleeping, or that he was a man famed for his unshakable cool. In this instant, he felt entirely unmoored. I had no idea, he managed at last. Does anyone else know about this? Avery glanced around, then shook her head. No, not the airline, not anyone else from your company, just me. And I've thought about telling you for years. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, yet she stood strong, as though bracing for rejection. Oliver struggled to speak, mind racing through all the possible scenarios. Could he request a DNA test right here at 30,000 feet? Could he simply accept her word, which carried Cassandra's memory? He had come on this flight expecting a typical journey. Instead, he faced a revelation that shattered the carefully constructed narrative of his life. Slowly, he closed a hand around the water bottle, using it like an anchor. We need to talk, he whispered, voice trembling. But not here, not in front of everyone. When we land, please, let's find a moment somewhere quiet. Avery nodded, tears threatening to escape as she fought to maintain her professional composure. I'm on duty for a few more hours, she said softly, but I'd like that. Before she turned away, Oliver caught her hand. It was a brief gesture, father to child, though they felt more like strangers than family. I'm sorry, he murmured. I'm so sorry, I didn't know. She gave a slight shaky smile, then released his hand and walked back toward the galley. Oliver was left reeling in his seat, hardly noticing the gentle turbulence that rocked the aircraft. 1,000 questions whirled in his mind about Cassandra, about Avery's upbringing, about how he had unknowingly missed 2 decades of a child's life. He glanced out the window, seeing nothing but dark sky and faint city lights below. His reflection stared back at him, a man who had always prided himself on preparedness, yet now found himself utterly unprepared for this. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like, and share with friends. Oliver spent the next hour in a fog of thought, barely registering the flight attendants collecting empty glasses or the faint overhead announcements about turbulence. He would occasionally flick his gaze toward the galley, catching brief glimpses of Avery as she carried trays or leaned in to listen to a passenger's request. At times, their eyes would meet. In those fleeting moments, Oliver felt the same jolt of disbelief over and over again. He was looking at his daughter, a daughter he never knew existed. He recalled Cassandra Sinclair vividly now, the ambitious intern who had once enthralled him with her bright ideas about product marketing. Back in those days, Oliver had been racing up the corporate ladder, building brand partnerships and meticulously courting investors. He remembered Cassandra's earnest questions, her fascination with learning every angle of the business. They had shared after-work coffees, stolen moments of unspoken tension, and one night that lingered in his memories. Eventually, Oliver's focus on expansion dragged him to another city. Cassandra stayed behind. A swirl of complications and missed timing kept them from pursuing anything further, and never once did she write or call to say she was pregnant. He felt an icy twinge of anger, warring with the shock inside him. Why had Cassandra hidden Avery's existence? Had she feared that Oliver, so consumed by his pursuits, would refuse to acknowledge a child? He couldn't picture himself doing that, but he had to admit he'd been relentless back then, often blind to anything beyond his career. The airplane's gentle sway reminded him that he could find no answers in the hush of first class. The one person who might explain it was gone, leaving Avery as the sole keeper of secrets. After a while, another attendant dimmed the overhead lights to help passengers sleep. Oliver reclined his seat but couldn't close his eyes. Across the aisle, a few travelers had dozed off, headphones askew, eyelids fluttering in fitful rest. Oliver himself was too restless to drift away. He tried scanning a few more pages of his financial documents, yet the numbers jumbled in his mind. Eventually, he gave up and quietly rose from his seat. He found Avery at the rear of the first-class cabin, sorting cups and silverware into neat piles. She glanced up, then turned away, as if uncertain whether she was allowed to speak. Oliver stepped forward, voice subdued, so as not to disturb the other travelers. "Avery, can we talk for a moment?" She set down a stack of napkins, her cheeks flushed. "I'm technically still on duty, but if you give me 10 minutes, I can take a short break." Her voice trembled. "Meet me near the curtained galley behind business class." He nodded. "I'll be there." Slipping down the aisle, Oliver passed rows of seats where overhead monitors played silent movies. The hush of a nighttime flight enveloped him. He entered the small galley area Avery had mentioned, standing off to one side so as not to block the path if other crew members appeared. In 5 minutes, Avery joined him, stepping past a curtain. She looked at him expectantly, her features lit by a single overhead lamp designed to keep the cabin dim. Up close, he saw her more clearly, the delicate angles of her face, a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. Oliver struggled for the right words. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry to corner you like this, but I need to know more. About Cassandra. About you." Avery nodded, folding her arms. "I understand." Oliver searched her expression. "Why didn't Cassandra ever tell me? We stayed in touch for a few months after I transferred. Then the communication just fell off." Avery swallowed. "She found out she was pregnant a few weeks after you left. She wrote a letter, but you'd moved on to a new city. And from what she always said, you were about to seal a huge investment. She didn't want to derail you. She worried you might see it as a burden instead of a blessing." A shaky breath escaped her. "I grew up hearing her reasons. Sometimes I still don't understand them. But she swore that giving you your freedom was better than tying you down with a child when you were on the brink of something big." His heart twisted. "She never gave me a choice." Avery met his eyes. "She thought she was protecting both of us." They stood in silence for a moment, each grappling with an emotion that threatened to overwhelm. Around them, the faint buzz of the aircraft seemed to magnify the tension. Finally, Oliver spoke. "What about you? Where have you been all this time? Did you try to find me before?" She lowered her gaze. "When I was little, Mom told me your name, but it didn't mean anything. You were just a story in her memory. When I got older, I learned you were the CEO of Cunningham International. I realized you were the man on the news, in the magazines. I was furious for a while. Furious you hadn't been there. Furious my mother never let you know. Then, she got sick." Oliver's breath caught. He remembered reading a brief obituary for Cassandra Sinclair a few years back, but it contained no details. At the time, her name had sparked a pang of regret, but he hadn't dug deeper, telling himself they had been out of touch for decades. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, voice rough. Avery forced a sad smile. "It's okay. She passed away last year. Pancreatic cancer. She left behind an envelope with some final words for me, urging me to forgive and move forward." Her eyes fluttered shut. "I took a job as a flight attendant because I wanted to travel, and a small part of me hoped maybe I'd run into you one day." Oliver sighed. I can't believe I failed to realize you existed." The guilt was overwhelming. Avery reached out, hesitated, then placed a hand on his arm. "You didn't fail, not intentionally. I'm not here to accuse you. I just wanted to see you, to understand who my father is, beyond the articles and TV interviews." His gaze flicked from her hand to her face. "I'll tell you anything you want to know," he promised. "I'm about to do my final cabin checks," she said, stepping back a little. "When we land in New York, I have a 24-hour layover. We could meet somewhere away from all this." Her eyes swept the cramped galley. Oliver nodded, relief mixing with trepidation. "Yes, let's do that." She pressed her lips together, fighting emotion that threatened to break through her professional exterior. Then she disappeared behind the curtain, returning to her duties. Oliver was left standing there, feeling as though his entire world had tilted. Somehow he made his way back to his seat. The flight progressed with tedious slowness. Or maybe he was just impatient, replaying every moment from that conversation. He attempted to rest, shutting his eyes, but his thoughts churned too violently. Avery's quiet strength, her gentleness underpinned by heartbreak, reminded him so much of Cassandra. He pictured the intern's determined face as she typed up press releases late into the night or listened to him brainstorm product features. A swirl of memory collided with the present, painting a story of what might have been if fate, or timing, or simply better communication had intervened. At last, the pilot announced their descent into John F. Kennedy International Airport. The overhead lights brightened, and passengers stirred awake, gathering electronics and personal belongings. Oliver felt his pulse quicken. In a matter of minutes, he would stand on solid ground again, able to speak to Avery in the hustle of the terminal, if only briefly, before she disappeared behind airline protocols. He was determined not to lose her now. As the plane touched down and taxied to the gate, Oliver pressed a hand to his chest, inhaling deeply. He caught sight of Avery once more during the final safety checks, her expression poised, though he noticed the tiny lines of worry around her eyes. When the aircraft door opened and passengers filed out, Oliver waited until most of them had gone ahead. Then, pulling his carry-on behind him, he stepped into the jet bridge. He paused halfway, looking back. Avery stood at the cabin entrance, thanking travelers, their eyes locked in silent acknowledgement of a shared secret none of the other disembarking passengers could guess. He nodded, stepping aside to let others pass. In a quieter moment, Avery emerged, clasping a small black sweater around her shoulders. "I have a short debrief with the crew," she explained softly. "Can you meet me at arrivals near the baggage claim? I'll find you there." Oliver's throat felt tight, but he managed a calm nod. "Of course, I'll wait." Navigating JFK's labyrinthine corridors, Oliver found the designated baggage claim carousel, though he had only carry-on luggage. He stood off to one side, ignoring the swirl of travelers greeting loved ones and jostling for prime spots. Despite the chaos, time felt frozen in his mind. Every so often, the same question repeated. What now? After 20 agonizing minutes, Avery appeared. She looked out of place in her flight attendant uniform among the crowd of casual travelers. She gave a small wave and approached, her eyes flicking toward the overhead signs. "I only have a little time before the airline shuttle takes me to the crew hotel," she said, voice hurried. "But maybe we can exchange numbers or set a time to meet tomorrow." Oliver rummaged in his jacket pocket, pulling out his business card. He scribbled his personal mobile on the back and handed it to her. "Please, call me anytime." She took the card. "There's a cafe near my hotel," she said. "Can you come by tomorrow morning? We can talk properly. No more interruptions." He nodded. "I'll be there. Text me the address and a time that works." They stood awkwardly, the chaotic swirl of baggage claim forming a backdrop for the single most significant conversation of Oliver's life. He wanted to say a dozen things, apologize again, promise her anything she needed. But words felt hollow. Instead, he reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "I can't pretend this doesn't change everything for me." Avery's cheeks shone under the harsh terminal lighting. "I'm glad I finally worked up the courage," she whispered. I hope this can be a good thing." He nodded slowly. "So do I." She let go, turning to hurry toward a waiting airline representative who signaled it was time to board the shuttle. Oliver watched her disappear into the throng. In that moment, he felt an unfamiliar vulnerability. He was the unstoppable CEO, the man with a plan for every crisis, except this one. Part of him was brimming with the unexpected joy of discovering a daughter, while another part was gutted by years forever lost. His phone buzzed. An incoming text from an unknown number displayed on the screen. "Hi, it's Avery. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., City Garden Cafe, 43rd and Lexington." Oliver's chest tightened with relief. She was reaching out, giving him a way in. He clutched the phone, weaving through the crowd as he exited the terminal. Outside, New York's late-night air was mild, carrying a hint of the city's perpetual motion. He took a taxi to his usual hotel, but for once, he didn't think about expense accounts or tomorrow's business meeting. Instead, he thought about the trembling in Avery's voice, the flickers of Cassandra he recognized, and the bittersweet truth that he had a grown daughter who had walked the earth for over 2 decades without him. By the time he reached his suite, Oliver was beyond exhaustion, yet still unsure if sleep would come easily. He sat on the bed, elbows braced on his knees, phone resting in his palm. A father. The word reverberated through him. No longer a hypothetical, no longer an abstract possibility. The memory of Avery's earnest, tearful gaze lingered in his mind, reminding him that for all his achievements, for all his so-called success, a critical piece of his life had been missing. Now, it was right there, asking for space in his world. He whispered into the dim room, almost a vow. "I won't let you down again." Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like, and share with friends. Oliver woke before sunrise in his Manhattan hotel suite, the weight of the previous evening's revelation pressing on his chest. He'd hardly slept after discovering Avery, the daughter he never knew existed, but an odd adrenaline kept him alert. The morning sky glowed with a pale, hesitant light, and horns blared faintly on the street below. Instead of reviewing the documents he had intended to finalize, he found himself staring into his reflection in the bathroom mirror. Was there any trace of fatherhood in the lines around his eyes or the tightness at the corners of his mouth? He allowed the question to linger, feeling a flutter of uncertainty. Then he dressed in a crisp navy suit, determined to keep his promise to meet Avery at the cafe. He departed. The City Garden Cafe was nestled between towering office buildings on 43rd and Lexington, a modest refuge of greenery and wood-paneled charm. Oliver arrived early, nerves fraying despite years of high-pressure negotiations. Sitting at a corner table, he tried to distract himself by perusing a menu of herbal teas and freshly baked pastries, but nothing could quell the anticipation twisting his stomach. He had never felt so uncertain, not even when risking millions on a volatile business venture. Each tick of his wristwatch reminded him that this was real and unrehearsed. Outside, the city's pulse throbbed, traffic horns echoing between skyscrapers. Inside, Oliver smoothed his tie repeatedly, wishing he could script whatever words came next. At precisely 9, the bell over the door chimed. He looked up, heart lurching suddenly. Avery slipped in wearing a simple gray sweater and dark jeans, quite different from her formal flight attendant attire. She paused near the entrance, scanning the tables until she spotted Oliver. Her expression held a mixture of apprehension and tentative warmth. He stood, a polite reflex triggered by years in business settings, in motion for her to join him. She approached slowly, and he offered an uncertain smile. Neither seemed to know how to greet the other, so they simply sat. A friendly-looking waiter appeared, filling their water glasses and reciting the specials in a brisk tone. Once he left, an awkward pause stretched between them. Finally, Avery cleared her throat. "Thanks for meeting me. I appreciate you making time." Oliver nodded. "I'm glad you reached out. Much to discuss." She folded her hands around the glass of water, gaze flicking toward the street beyond the window. "I'm not sure where to start," she admitted, voice catching. Oliver leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Maybe we just talk about who you are, who I am, and see where that leads." She nodded, chewing the inside of her cheek. "Well, I grew up in Chicago. Mom worked as a copywriter for a small media firm. It was always just the two of us. She never said anything bad about you, but she didn't want me to chase you either." Oliver exhaled, imagining Cassandra alone in a bustling city, raising this remarkable girl. "I wish she'd told me," he murmured. Avery managed a sad smile. She did what she thought was right. The waiter returned briefly, asking if they wanted coffee or anything to eat. Oliver signaled for just 2 coffees, feeling a tightness in his chest that ruled out hunger. Once they were alone again, Avery spoke haltingly. "Mom told me about how smart and driven you were, and how you never stayed in one place for long. She said she didn't want to risk tying you down. She was proud of what you achieved, but it wasn't easy for her." Oliver felt guilt throb through him, reminiscent of a wound he hadn't realized he carried. "I should have found her," he whispered. "There was a time I wondered what became of her, but I assumed she'd moved on happily." Avery turned her gaze downward. "I think she tried to cope." Their coffees arrived, steam curling from the porcelain cups. Oliver thanked the waiter quietly, then wrapped his hands around the cup's warmth. "I want to make this right," he said. "I don't know how, but I'm not going to disappear again." Avery stared at the ripples in her coffee. "I spent a long time being angry at you, even though it wasn't totally fair. I went through college not knowing if I should reach out. Then Mom got sick, and everything became about taking care of her. By the time I thought about contacting you again, it felt too late. But here we are, and I just want honesty. No scripts, no empty gestures." Oliver nodded, heart heavy. "You'll have that. Whatever happens, I promise to be real. I'm done." Avery took a cautious sip of her coffee, then glanced up at Oliver with the faintest trace of a smile. "I guess we can start with small steps. I'm not expecting some grand father-daughter relationship overnight." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Tell me about yourself. What do you like to do besides traveling the world as a flight attendant?" The corner of her lips curved slightly. "I love photography, especially street scenes and candid portraits. It's actually why I got into flying. New places mean new perspectives." Oliver smiled back, picturing her exploring global cities with a camera in hand. "That's incredible," he murmured. "I'd love to see your work sometime." She nodded. "Maybe I'll show you my album from Rome." I was there. A contemplative silence settled over them, broken by the occasional clang of cutlery from neighboring tables. Oliver realized how surreal it was to be sitting with his grown daughter, discussing her life as though they'd known each other for years. The fatherly impulse to protect her welled in him. "Listen," he said quietly. "I know this is all new, but if you ever need anything, someone to talk to, financial help, anything, I'm here." She studied him for a moment, emotions flickering behind her eyes. "I've learned to do most things on my own," she admitted, "but maybe it would be nice not to feel so alone anymore." Oliver reached across the table, gently squeezing her hand. "You won't be," he vowed. "Not as long as I can help it." She nodded. By the time they finished their coffees, an hour had slipped by almost unnoticed. Outside, the brightness of mid-morning had taken hold, casting shifting sunbeams through the cafe windows. A few customers came and went, but Oliver and Avery remained engrossed in conversation. They spoke of her childhood interests, the places she'd visited for work, and even touched on lighter memories of Cassandra. Oliver found himself smiling more than he had in months, absorbing every detail she shared. Eventually, she glanced at her phone, sighing. "I have to check in with the crew by noon," she said apologetically. He nodded, trying not to let disappointment show. "Of course. Can I see you again before you fly out?" Her face lit with a soft relief. "I'd like that. Maybe dinner tonight." Oliver signaled for the check, and they stepped outside together, pausing on the sidewalk beneath a canopy of newly leafed trees. A mild breeze swept a strand of hair across Avery's face, and she brushed it aside with an unconscious grace that made Oliver think again of Cassandra. "Text me a time and place," he said, his tone hopeful. She nodded, clutching her purse. "I will. Thank you for today." He gave a tentative smile. "No, Avery, thank you. This means more than I can say." She offered a small wave, then turned to head toward the nearest subway entrance. Oliver watched her go, heart brimming with an unfamiliar blend of joy and regret. He vowed silently that their next meeting would be just the beginning, not another missed chance. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like, and share with friends. After leaving the cafe, Oliver felt a surge of energy he rarely experienced outside his typical corporate triumphs. He walked briskly through Midtown, ignoring the persistent chime of his phone signaling new emails. This was supposed to be a day full of negotiations with a prospective investor, but now his mind was fully consumed by thoughts of Avery. She had grown up halfway across the country, shaped by experiences he had never witnessed. Guilt and wonder curled around each recollection of her gentle smiles, her hesitant admissions, and the memory of Cassandra's warmth. By the time he reached his office near Fifth Avenue, Oliver was determined to clear his schedule that evening. He breezed past the front desk, nodding at the receptionist. Within moments, he was in his private corner suite, surveying the skyline. The city seemed busier than usual, but perhaps that was only a reflection of the turmoil inside him. He glanced at the clock, then tapped a button on his desk phone. "Patricia," he said when his assistant answered. "Can you please confirm any appointments for tonight? I need the evening free." A faint pause crackled on the line. "There's a dinner meeting with the Garibaldi group at 7. It's rather important. Would you like to reschedule?" Oliver's jaw clenched. This meeting was indeed important. He had spent weeks courting Garibaldi's capital infusion for a new overseas expansion. However, that sense of paternal commitment overshadowed his usual business priorities. Avery had asked for dinner, and he refused to let her down. "Yes," he responded finally. "Let them know something urgent has come up. I'll arrange a follow-up. Offer them my apologies." His assistant sounded perplexed, but she quickly followed through. In all the years Patricia had worked for Oliver, she had rarely heard him cancel on a major prospective partner. But Oliver barely noticed her confusion. Once the call ended, he started drafting an email to the Garibaldi group promising a better arrangement. Then his phone vibrated, a text from Avery. She wrote, "How about 7:30 at Della Luna? It's near Times Square, cozy place I like. Let me know if that works." Oliver typed back immediately, "That's perfect. Looking forward to it. See you there." Hitting send, he realized how uncharacteristically eager he felt. With that settled, he turned his attention to the day's work, diving into the sea of spreadsheets, proposals, and phone calls. But in every spare moment, his mind drifted back to Avery. Her quiet sincerity, her thoughtful questions, and the unspoken father-daughter bond waiting to be built. Hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Oliver only paused for a brief lunch at his desk, flipping through one contract while scanning the dictionary definitions of parental rights, adoption, and emotional support. Each term sent a pang of uncertainty through him. Did Avery plan to cultivate a deep father-daughter connection, or did she only want a cautious friendship? Had she forgiven him entirely, or was that just a veneer? He had no blueprint for forging a relationship with a grown child, and that realization left him uneasy. Eventually, the late afternoon sun slanted through his windows, painting the floor in honeyed stripes. Patricia reappeared, placing a few final contracts for him to review, her eyes reflecting unspoken curiosity. He thanked her in a clipped tone, then glanced at his watch. Time to wrap things up. He closed his laptop, tidied the papers, and left the office with a restless excitement that almost rivaled the final moments before a major merger. Arriving at his hotel, he changed out of his formal suit, opting for a neatly pressed shirt, well-tailored slacks, and a sport coat, something more relaxed than his usual boardroom attire. Leaving the hotel in a taxi, Oliver felt his heart pound with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The roads leading toward Times Square brimmed with cars, brake lights glinting in the waning daylight. By the time his cab dropped him off, he could see the immense neon billboards, tourists meandering on sidewalks, and people hawking tickets to various shows. Amid that cacophony, Della Luna's entrance looked like a small oasis, a narrow door with a softly lit sign. Oliver pulled it open and stepped inside. Warm scents of basil, tomato sauce, and freshly baked bread enveloped him. The interior was calm, with wooden booths and walls adorned by vintage Italian travel posters. A hostess guided him to a cozy corner. He settled in, feeling strangely nervous. He was early, 15 minutes, so he sipped water, eyes flicking to the entrance every time he heard the door chime. At precisely 7:25, the bell rang again. Avery slipped in wearing a simple burgundy dress beneath a light jacket, her hair down around her shoulders. She scanned the tables until she spotted Oliver, then approached with a tiny wave. He stood, greeting her with a tentative hug. The embrace was quick yet startlingly natural. They slid into the booth, menus waiting. Avery looked around with a fondness in her expression. "I used to come here after layovers," she said quietly. "It's never too crowded and the pasta is good." Oliver nodded, grateful she had chosen a place so welcoming. "Thank you for suggesting it. This is a nice change from my usual stuffy business dinners." She smiled shyly. "I thought something intimate might be better." They each skimmed the menu, eventually deciding on simple dishes. She chose spaghetti pomodoro while Oliver picked chicken piccata. After the waiter took their order, Oliver placed his hands on the table, unsure how to begin. He could tell Avery felt the same, her posture somewhat tense. "How was your day?" she asked softly, breaking the ice. Oliver chuckled. "It was fine, though I probably accomplished half what I planned. My mind kept drifting." A small smile lit her face. "I was thinking about this evening, too. I, worried you might change your mind." He shook his head, voice firm. "Not a chance. This is the most important thing I've had on my calendar in a long time." For a second, a flicker of relief crossed Avery's face. She fiddled with the edge of her napkin. "I still can't believe we're sitting here, talking like this." Their meals arrived, momentarily halting the conversation. They ate quietly for a while, gradually trading anecdotes. Oliver told her about growing up with a single mother who pushed him to succeed, about his earliest memory of wanting to run his own company. Avery explained that she'd only recently become a flight attendant, but had already traveled to cities she never dreamed of visiting. She admitted she'd occasionally kept an eye on the corporate world, reading about Oliver's accomplishments with a mixture of pride and resentment. Partway through dinner, Oliver noticed her expression turn pensive. "What is it?" he asked gently. She twisted her fork in her spaghetti. I'm just trying to reconcile the man in the articles, this untouchable CEO everyone admires or fears, with the man sitting in front of me. It's surreal. Oliver let out a breath, resting his fork. I'm not untouchable, not anymore. The truth is, I let my drive define me for decades. If I had known about you... He paused, overwhelmed by the flood of regret. Avery's eyes met his, and in them he saw both empathy and a guarded readiness to protect herself. Mom never spoke badly of you, she said at last. She just said she had reasons for not sharing her news. Maybe she worried how it would end, or maybe she worried you'd resent her. But that doesn't change the fact we're here now. He nodded, determined to focus on the present. I'd like to make up for the time we lost. I know we can't magically fix it, but I want to be part of your life. Avery's expression softened, and she reached across to rest her hand lightly on his. I'd like that too, she whispered. I want to see where this goes. A sense of hope warmed Oliver's chest. They finished their main courses and decided to share a tiramisu for dessert. As they savored the sweet, creamy dish, Oliver began to share small personal details he rarely discussed. How he sometimes felt lonely in the penthouse even though it had all the amenities. How no amount of success filled the emptiness he'd carried since leaving certain relationships behind. Avery, in turn, confessed that she struggled with self-doubt, moving from city to city, not quite sure where she belonged. In the dimmed glow of Della Luna's lights, they inched closer to a truer understanding. When the plates were cleared, Oliver insisted on covering the bill. Avery protested briefly, but he dismissed the notion with a small smile. "Humor me," he murmured, voice thick with a subtle mixture of relief and sadness. After he paid, they strolled outside, stepping into Times Square's swirl of color. Tourists pointed at neon signs and street performers in elaborate costumes vying for attention. The spectacle felt distant to Oliver. He was consumed by the quiet triumph of walking next to his daughter. She folded her arms, gazing up at the skyscrapers. "So, I'm here for another 2 weeks," she said. "My flight rotation keeps me based in New York temporarily. After that, I might get posted elsewhere." Oliver's heart lurched. He wasn't ready to let her slip away into the next city. "Then let's make the most of these 2 weeks," he suggested. "If you can spare more time, I'd love to show you the offices. Maybe introduce you to a few colleagues. Only if you want." She nodded slowly, eyes reflecting curiosity. "I'd like to see where you work. Maybe tomorrow afternoon?" He quickly agreed, promising to send her the details. The prospect of bringing her into his professional realm felt monumental, like forging a link between the man he had been and the father he hoped to become. They veered onto a quieter side street away from the glaring lights, continuing their conversation at a leisurely pace. Avery mentioned a favorite park in Brooklyn she often visited during layovers, describing how the skyline across the East River felt simultaneously humbling and reassuring. Oliver listened intently, struck by the differences between them that only made him more eager to learn. He found solace in the gentle lilt of her voice, the quick glimpses of laughter, and the potential for a deeper closeness. Eventually, they arrived at a modest hotel whose lobby sign glowed softly in the night. Avery halted under the canopy. "Thanks for dinner," she said, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm really glad we're trying." Oliver swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the sincerity in her tone. "I am too," he whispered. Before either of them could falter in the uncertainty, they shared a brief embrace. Avery's cheek pressed against his shoulder. He felt the faint rush of her breath, and for a fleeting second, he closed his eyes, holding her as though he could protect her from all the time they had lost. Then she stepped back, offering a shy nod. "Good night," she said. "See you tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," he echoed, and she disappeared through the automatic doors. Oliver lingered on the sidewalk, gaze drifting to the stars he could barely make out above Manhattan's glow. He had no illusions about the complexity ahead. Questions still remained, and they had 2 decades of distance to overcome. But as he hailed a cab to his hotel, he was wrapped in an unfamiliar sense of hope. A void he never realized was so large had begun to fill. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like, and share with friends. The following morning, Oliver stood by his hotel window, observing the Manhattan skyline through a haze of unspoken hopes. The sun was barely up, but he could not sleep any longer. His mind buzzed with the promise he had made to show Avery around the Cunningham International offices, a small step toward letting her enter a life he once believed was complete. After a quick shower, he dressed in a crisp shirt, no tie today, wanting to project a more welcoming, less intimidating aura. He still had a handful of conference calls, yet all felt secondary. At 9 sharp, he grabbed a taxi, heading straight to the Midtown skyscraper where his empire hummed. Patricia, his longtime assistant, was already at her desk when he arrived. She offered her usual polite greeting, but her eyes flicked over him as though trying to decipher a change. Normally, Oliver would have breezed by, launching directly into the day's plans, but he paused. "Patricia," he said softly, "I'm expecting a personal guest in the early afternoon. Her name is Avery. When she arrives, send her up right away." Patricia raised her eyebrows, curiosity evident, but she simply nodded and made a note. Oliver continued on, pushing through the glass doors to his private suite. He spent the remainder of the morning juggling investor calls, scribbling down notes in a spiral-bound notebook. Every so often he glanced at his phone. A message from Avery had come in just after breakfast, confirming she would be there around 1. He tried to quell his impatience, focusing on spreadsheets and projections, but his attention meandered back to her. The feeling unsettled him. In business, he had always kept a razor-sharp edge. But now, fatherly anticipation was blurring that edge, and he realized he did not mind in the slightest. Around noon, he took a brief lunch in the executive lounge, scanning headlines on his phone. Rumors of a rival company's new product circulated, and half his mind toyed with the potential ramifications. Yet each time a headline pulled him in, Avery's face surfaced in his thoughts. Could a bond form quickly after so many lost years? Or would they forever be 2 individuals connected by blood but divided by time? He found no easy answers, only a stubborn resolve to make the most of each day she remained in New York. Shortly before 1, Oliver returned to his office and tidied up. He placed the final printouts of a merger proposal into a folder, slid a few personal items into a drawer, and stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back. From this vantage, he could see the street below, dotted with cabs, buses, and pedestrians. He imagined Avery somewhere down there, perhaps emerging from a subway or stepping out of a taxi, feeling that same nervous thrill that fluttered in him. Moments later, Patricia buzzed in. "Sir, Ms. Avery is here." Oliver's pulse kicked up a notch. "Send her in," he replied, voice calm despite the excited undertone. He heard the gentle click of the door, turned, and saw Avery step in with cautious poise. She wore a simple blouse tucked into tailored pants, hair loosely tied back. Her eyes roamed the spacious office with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Wow," she breathed, glancing at the floor-to-ceiling windows. "You weren't kidding when you said you had a view," Oliver smiled, relief and pride mingling. "My domain," he said lightly, trying to ease any tension. He gestured toward a pair of leather chairs arranged around a small coffee table, away from the imposing main desk. "Let's sit. Can I get you something to drink? Water, coffee, tea?" Avery hesitated. "Water would be great." Oliver stepped outside briefly, asking Patricia to bring 2 bottles of sparkling water. When he returned, Avery was taking in the art on the walls, mostly abstract pieces he had collected on business trips. Her gaze lingered on one painting in muted greens and blues. "You bought that in Paris," he said quietly, remembering the hectic conference that had brought him there. She turned, meeting his eyes. "You remember the details of each piece?" He nodded, and she smiled faintly. "Mom loved art too. She was always hoping to visit Europe someday." A pang of guilt flickered through him again. "I wish I'd known," he murmured. "Maybe I could have helped her do that." Avery did not respond, but he saw something flicker across her expression. A moment later, Patricia arrived with the water, offering a discreet nod before exiting. Oliver handed one bottle to Avery, then sank into the chair across from her. There was an unspoken understanding that they were both standing on brand new territory, uncertain of the next step. "So," Avery began, twisting the cap off, "this is where it all happens." He nodded, looking at the desk that towered behind them, the shelves lined with awards and the wide windows revealing the city. "Yes. Cunningham International has offices worldwide now, but this is the heart of it. It started small, back when your mother—" He paused, swallowing. "When Cassandra was interning. We only had 2 floors in another building." Her eyes returned to the painting as though she could sense the ghost of her mother wandering these halls. She exhaled softly. "Tell me more about those early days. About you and Mom. I only ever heard fragments." The question struck a tender chord in him, but he forced a gentle smile. "It feels like a lifetime ago. Cassandra was bright, always brimming with ideas. She'd run around with typed notes on ways to improve marketing. I was busy courting angel investors, half running on coffee. We clicked as co-workers first, but then—" He trailed off. Avery studied him intently. "But then—" A sad smile touched his lips. "We grew closer, shared jokes, late-night brainstorming sessions. We never dated officially. I was always rushing off, always chasing the next pitch. In my head, I thought I would have time later. Life doesn't always give second chances, though." He inhaled. "If I could rewrite it, I would. But that doesn't help now." Avery nodded, face solemn. "Maybe we just accept it and figure out how to move on together." They spent another hour touring the workspace. Oliver introduced her to a few key staffers, not revealing her identity beyond saying she was a close family friend. In the marketing department, Avery asked about current campaigns, and the employees explained everything from social media pushes to brand collaborations. Oliver felt a rush of admiration as she listened, occasionally posing thoughtful questions. It echoed Cassandra's inquisitive nature, and he caught himself smiling more than once. Toward the end of the tour, they stepped into a quiet conference room. Sunlight streamed through wide windows, illuminating a polished oval table where many of Oliver's pivotal decisions had been sealed. Avery ran her fingers along the edge, then turned to him, eyes reflecting curiosity. "Do you ever feel lonely running all this?" she asked softly. "From the outside, your life looks huge." Oliver set down the folder he'd been carrying. "Sometimes," he admitted, "I have teams worldwide, but actual closeness? That's rare. I have acquaintances, potential partners, but not many true friends." He paused, noticing her expression shift. "Your mother was one of the few people who made me feel less like a machine." Avery bit her lip, absorbing the quiet ache in his voice. Then she set a hand on top of the table, looking thoughtful. "It's funny. Until recently, I thought I'd never even meet you. Now here we are talking about your world." He swallowed. "I want you to be part of it," he said simply. A wave of unsteady gratitude rose within him at her nod. They left the conference room, heading back toward his office, intending to discuss lunch plans. Just then, Oliver's phone buzzed. He recognized the name of a longtime associate, Paula Quinn, who was deeply involved in strategic projects. The text was terse. Need to discuss urgent matter, investor. Are you free now? Oliver felt a twinge of conflict. He wanted to devote all his attention to Avery, but he also sensed that ignoring major business issues could cause trouble. He turned to Avery. I might need 10 minutes to handle something urgent. Are you all right waiting in my office? She gave a small grin. Sure, I'll check out the view again. He managed a relieved smile and disappeared down the hallway. When he reached Paula's smaller office, he found her pacing near a large whiteboard scribbled with projections. She looked up, eyes tight with worry. Oliver, thanks for coming. It's about Garibaldi. They're feeling slighted after you canceled dinner last night. Their rep is hinting they may withdraw interest if we don't show commitment. Oliver pressed a hand to his temple. I see. Let's set something up with them. Maybe a brunch tomorrow, or an earlier meeting next week. Paula exhaled, flipping through notes. I can try, but their group is notoriously sensitive. Canceling at the last minute apparently sent the wrong signal. He mulled this over, realizing it was the cost of choosing Avery last night. Still, he refused to regret it. Offer them a personal lunch invitation for me next Wednesday at the Belmont Hotel. I'll make it special. We won't lose them, he said firmly, though inside he recognized the precarious balance he faced. Paula nodded, relief crossing her face, and Oliver left quickly, returning to his office. Inside he found Avery standing by the window, phone in hand. She glanced up, eyes full of concern. Everything okay? Oliver paused, catching his breath. Business tension, that's all. Just a client feeling neglected. She gave a rueful laugh. I guess that's your world. You must hate missing important meetings. He leaned against the doorframe. I used to, but some things are worth missing them for. Her gaze flicked to him, an unspoken question in her eyes before she nodded appreciatively. Eager to change the subject, Oliver guided her out of the office. Let's go grab lunch, he suggested, somewhere quiet. You can tell me more about your travel stories. She smiled and they hurried into the elevator, stepping outside to a mild spring afternoon. They found a small bistro a few blocks away, snagging a corner table on the shaded patio. After ordering sandwiches, they settled into relaxed conversation. Avery recounted a memorable layover in Tokyo, describing how she wandered the neon-lit streets late at night, her camera capturing swirling crowds. Oliver listened, imagining her alone in that luminous maze, feeling both pride at her independence and a pang of regret for not having been there to watch her grow. Yet they shared easy laughter, something that told him they were more alike than either had initially guessed. Eventually, with lunch almost finished, Avery's tone grew serious. I'll be honest, I don't know how much to tell people. Like, do I say, hey, guess what? I found my father and he's this big CEO, it's overwhelming. Oliver considered her dilemma. That's up to you, Avery. This relationship is ours to define. If you need time, we can keep it private. But if you want to share it someday, I won't hide. She traced the rim of her water glass. I appreciate that. They lingered over their meal, discussing small details of daily life. Her next flight assignment, his jam-packed schedule, simple hobbies neither had openly explored before. Every exchange wove a fragile thread of closeness. Once the plates were cleared, Oliver insisted on paying. They strolled back to his building hand in hand, though the gesture felt almost tentative. He half expected passers-by to stare, but no one seemed to notice. In a city of millions, they were just two more faces in the flow. When they reached the lobby, Avery checked the time on her phone. I need to stop by my hotel soon, she said, sounding reluctant. Got to handle some flight paperwork. Oliver nodded. Of course. Let me have my driver take you." She gave a small shake of her head. "You don't have to fuss. I'm perfectly fine hopping on the subway." But he smiled gently. "Let me indulge the dad instincts, just once." She laughed, capitulating. "All right, thank you." Before she climbed into the sleek black car, Avery turned back. "I'm free later tonight if you want to meet again, or if you're too busy." Oliver cut her off with a swift grin. "Name a time. I'll be there." Her eyes crinkled in a genuine smile. "I'll text you." He watched as the car pulled away, a deep sensation of gratitude blooming within. It was a day of small but monumental steps, opening his world to a daughter he never knew, discovering that a life so thoroughly dedicated to career could expand to hold something infinitely more meaningful. Still, the demands of business loomed, and as Oliver made his way back upstairs, he felt the tension of straddling two worlds. Yet there was no denying the intangible warmth that now underpinned each decision he made. In the reflection of polished steel doors, he caught sight of himself looking oddly at peace. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like, and share with friends. Oliver returned to his desk with an oddly buoyant step, the warmth of his lunch with Avery still fresh in his thoughts. The sun angled sharply through the tinted windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted across the polished floor. A swirl of relief and uncertainty kept him from diving straight back into work. He found his mind dwelling on her stories of late-night wanderings in Tokyo, her calm acceptance of everything he'd shared. In a quiet moment, he let himself savor the knowledge that for the first time in decades, he wasn't alone in his personal world. Yet, as if the universe were balancing the scales, his phone buzzed with an incoming call from none other than Paula Quinn. She rarely phoned without cause. Oliver answered on the second ring, resting a hand on the edge of his desk. "Yes?" "The Garibaldi Group. They've agreed to the lunch meeting next Wednesday, but they've also asked if you're still serious about the strategic partnership. They want proof of your commitment. Specifically, a detailed pitch with fresh data, not just the old numbers." Oliver exhaled slowly. "They're pushing boundaries. Fine. Pull everything we have and schedule a meeting with finance first thing tomorrow. I'll personally compile a revised package." Paula paused. "Understood. I'll get started. Oh, and keep in mind they're known to back out abruptly if they sense any waffling." "I'm not waffling," he said, though a flicker of defensiveness crept into his tone. "We'll be ready." He ended the call, grimacing slightly. The tension with Garibaldi, one of the region's most sought-after sources of capital, had been building for weeks, ever since Oliver canceled that dinner. But he couldn't regret prioritizing Avery. No deal, no matter how lucrative, could overshadow his need to be present for his daughter. Nonetheless, the consequences were real, and he had no wish to watch a vital partnership unravel. Determined to remain calm, Oliver spread fresh spreadsheets across his desk. He tapped a pen restlessly against the corner of a folder, formulating strategies that might placate Garibaldi. He'd talk to finance, he'd gather all the new quarterly projections, and craft a compelling narrative to prove Cunningham International was worth the investment. It was a balancing act, but if there was one skill Oliver had mastered, it was navigating high-stakes negotiations. He was halfway through drafting an outline for the revised pitch when another ping signaled a text message. Expecting more corporate drama, he flipped his phone over and felt a wave of relief at Avery's name on the screen. Her message read, "Finished with my flight paperwork. Any evening plans? I'm free after 7. Even the simple question lit a small spark of excitement in his chest. He typed back, "Let's have dinner. I know a quiet spot near Bryant Park. 7:30? Her response came quickly. "Perfect. See you then." Oliver grinned, slipping the phone into his jacket pocket. He couldn't recall a time when simple social plans brought him such easy joy. Usually his dinners were about forging alliances or celebrating deals. Now it was about forging something far more meaningful. He turned his attention back to the data, but each number seemed less urgent than before. Over the next few hours, he channeled his focus into problem solving. He conferred with finance, devoured updated market analyses, and refined the bullet points that would eventually become part of a full investor deck. Staff scurried in and out, arms laden with documents, but nobody asked about his private life. In that sense, Oliver felt safe to blend fatherhood into the margins, drifting off for a moment to recall Avery's laughter at lunch. Finally, as 6 o'clock rolled around, Oliver stretched his stiff shoulders. He eyed the half-finished outline on his screen, decided it was enough for the night, and shut it down. He left instructions with Patricia to forward any urgent matters to his phone, then ventured to the elevator with a calm acceptance of whatever tomorrow would bring. For once, he had no interest in staying late at the office. Avery was waiting. He headed to his hotel to freshen up, discarding his tie and switching to a comfortable blazer. The reflection in the mirror revealed a man who looked both weary and strangely younger, as though an invisible burden had eased. Folding away the day's stresses, Oliver exited the hotel, stepping into a mild evening breeze. Rather than hail a taxi, he decided to walk toward Bryant Park, letting the city's rhythm guide him. New York at dusk displayed a chorus of glimmering lights. Buildings that soared overhead wore bands of gold from illuminated windows, while food carts lined sidewalks with enticing smells of hot pretzels and roasted nuts. Oliver navigated around clusters of theater-goers and business people scurrying to late meetings, all while his mind gravitated to Avery's bright smile. He spotted the restaurant at a small corner across from a row of bookstalls, their shutters lowered for the night. The signage was subtle, silver letters on frosted glass, and inside, tables were lit by warm pendant lamps. Avery was already there, seated near a window. When she noticed him, her expression lit up in a way that felt more satisfying than any stock market gain he'd ever chased. He slid into the seat across from her, noting the cozy booth draped with plush cushions. "Good to see you," he said, still catching his breath from the brisk walk. She angled her head. "Likewise. Did you manage your business crisis?" Oliver chuckled. "It's ongoing, but I've done what I can. The rest will wait until tomorrow." A waitress appeared with menus, offering a quick rundown of specials: seafood risotto, pan-seared duck, and a vegetarian pasta brimming with summer vegetables. Oliver ordered the duck, while Avery requested the risotto. Once they were alone again, she rested her chin on her interlaced fingers. "Thanks for coming. I've been thinking about you all afternoon, wondering how you juggle so much." He shrugged lightly. "I used to think it was all that mattered. This big conglomerate, expansion, more deals. Lately, I'm realizing there's more to life." His voice caught slightly on the last sentence, but Avery nodded with understanding. "I'm glad. Honestly, I was nervous about intruding on your schedule. I mean, a CEO can't just drop everything." A softness entered Oliver's features. "I can, if it's for something important. And you are." She absorbed that quietly. The hum of low conversation from other diners formed a pleasant backdrop. Outside, the city glistened, but their corner felt private, as though the world had narrowed to just them. "Tell me more about you," Avery prodded gently. "Something that's not business-related. Like, what do you do on weekends?" The question startled Oliver. Weekends. They usually melted into the blur of traveling or hosting company events. He paused. "Honestly, I've spent far too many weekends in boardrooms or reading over data. Sometimes I'll catch a show or a gallery opening." He rubbed the side of his jaw, feeling a tinge of embarrassment at how narrow that sounded. "I used to enjoy hiking when I was younger. Haven't done that in ages." Avery smiled, eyes sparkling with an idea. "We could go for a hike sometime. There must be some trails upstate. Unless you're not up for the challenge." A short laugh escaped him. Challenge accepted. He realized with a jolt of anticipation that having a hiking partner might coax him out of his usual workaholic bubble. Before he could add more, their food arrived. They sampled each other's plates, trading appreciative nods at the fresh flavors. As they ate, Avery recounted an unexpected emergency she'd once dealt with on a flight to Hong Kong, a passenger who fainted mid-journey. Oliver listened in fascination, struck by her calm resourcefulness. She seemed to handle crises as deftly as he handled corporate standoffs. Partway through the meal, Avery set her fork down. Her expression shifted into something more somber, though not unkind. "Dad." She paused, seeming to test the word. Oliver's heart lurched. She hadn't called him that until now. "There's something I've been wondering." She fiddled with the edge of her napkin. "Were you ever close to having a family before? A wife, kids, anything like that?" He felt a pang, both from the question and the sound of her calling him Dad. "I dated a few times," he admitted, "but nothing lasted. My life was about forging expansions, sealing deals across continents. I guess I pushed personal connections to the side. A few relationships ended because I refused to slow down." Avery's lips pressed together in quiet contemplation. "So I'm your only child?" He nodded, meeting her gaze with regret. "My only child, yes. Though I wish I'd known that years ago." She looked away, blinking as if to stave off tears. "I'm sorry, too, for all the lost time." He reached across the table, covering her hand gently. "I know it's complicated," he said in a hushed tone, "but I want to move forward. I'd like you to have a place in my life, and me in yours, if we can figure out how." She squeezed his hand in return. "I'd like that," she echoed, voice tinged with emotion. They finished dinner slowly, savoring dessert and each other's company. Outside, the bustle of the city pressed on, but the moment felt apart from that swirl. Eventually, they left the restaurant, stepping onto the sidewalk to find a mild night. The lights from Bryant Park glinted invitingly, so they strolled past the iron gates, weaving around clusters of chairs. Fairy lights twinkled from nearby trees, and a gentle hush blanketed the lawn. Avery looked around, hugging her arms. "I used to dream of nights like this when I was younger, some big city moment with my dad." She let out a self-conscious laugh. "I sound ridiculous." "You don't," Oliver assured. "I dreamed sometimes too, though it was more a vague longing than a clear wish. I always felt something was missing." They settled onto two chairs near the edge of the lawn, facing a small fountain that cascaded softly. A pair of young musicians played violins nearby, the melody lilting across the park. For a time, father and daughter simply sat, lulled by the lights and music. Oliver reached out to take her hand again, as though verifying this was real and not some fleeting illusion. Avery looked at him, and in her eyes he saw both Cassandra's gentleness and a unique resilience all her own. He swallowed a surge of emotion. "Thank you for giving me a chance," he whispered. "You could have stayed anonymous." She blinked back tears. "I thought about that, but Mom left a letter for me, urging me not to let fear rule my life. So here I am." Oliver's chest tightened. "I'm grateful." They sat a few minutes more, letting the hush cradle them. Then Avery checked her phone. Another early shift beckoned. Oliver walked her toward the nearest corner, where he insisted on finding a taxi. She relented, and when the cab pulled up, she hesitated before climbing inside. "Sleep well," she said, offering him a shy smile. "We'll figure out our next plan soon, right?" "Absolutely," he said, stepping back from the curb. He tapped lightly on the roof of the taxi and it merged into the flow of city traffic. A quiet ache hollowed his chest as the taillights vanished. He remained on the sidewalk a moment longer, letting the reality sink in. Avery was his daughter. In only a handful of days, they had learned more about each other than either had imagined possible. But there was still so much more ground to cover. So many more conversations about everything from Cassandra's final wishes to the simplest acts of everyday life. Hiking up the sidewalk, Oliver turned his gaze to the starless sky. The luminous towers around him felt less like triumphant symbols of success and more like an ever-present reminder that life had soared on without him noticing. But now, at least, there was a chance to set new priorities. He pocketed his hands, inhaled the city air, and allowed himself a small, hopeful grin. He had found something far more rewarding than any corporate victory, a second chance. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like, and share with friends. Oliver woke the next morning feeling unusually rested. Though he had tossed and turned with thoughts of Avery, a sense of calm had eventually lulled him into a deep sleep. Even the city's early sirens and construction din seemed less abrasive than usual. He showered, dressed in a charcoal gray suit, and headed toward the office with a feeling that something momentous was shifting in his life. He knew he had to finalize materials for the Garibaldi Group, but he also felt a strong desire to speak with Avery as soon as she was free. The need to balance fatherhood and corporate demands, while daunting, had become his new reality. Upon arriving, he found Patricia waiting with a neat stack of documents. She gave him a measured look, as though silently acknowledging the weight he carried. "Morning, sir. Finance sent these new projections. They want your approval before we package them for Garibaldi." Oliver nodded and flipped through the charts. The numbers appeared promising, but he sensed an impatience behind each statistic. He pictured the Garibaldi representatives tapping their polished shoes, ready to walk away at any sign of hesitation. He muttered a quick thank you and settled at his desk. For the next 2 hours, he immersed himself in the data, searching for any vulnerability that might derail the deal. He refined his talking points, anticipating Garibaldi's likely objections. By late morning, he was finalizing slides when his phone vibrated. A text from Avery appeared on the screen. "Hey, finished a flight earlier than expected. I'm free if you want coffee later." He felt a bright spark cut through the tension. Immediately, he typed back, "Absolutely. Let's meet at 2. We can go to that place near your hotel or wherever you prefer." She replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a short message. "Near my hotel works, thanks." Oliver smiled, placing his phone face down on the desk. Just the act of scheduling time with his daughter felt oddly liberating. He wrapped up the investor packet shortly after noon, then summoned Paula Quinn for a quick consultation. She stepped in, tablet in hand, wearing a tailored blazer that hinted at her no-nonsense approach. "Here's the final deck," Oliver said. "We'll show Garibaldi we're still focused. I'll meet them on Wednesday, as planned. In the meantime, I need you to keep them in the loop, without letting them set any more ultimatums." Paula glanced at the slides, nodding. "Understood. I'll put out some diplomatic feelers. They'll want reassurance, but I can handle it." She pursed her lips. "If you're confident we can salvage this, then I'll proceed accordingly." Oliver nodded firmly. "We will salvage it. That's not negotiable." Paula offered a clipped smile, then departed. Oliver watched her go, a strange mixture of resolve and mild guilt settling in. He was no stranger to corporate high-wire acts, but his priorities were in flux. Securing this major investment was essential for Cunningham International's next phase, yet all he truly wanted right now was to spend time with Avery. Despite his unwavering commitment to success, fatherhood kept intruding in the best possible way. Shortly before 2, he stepped into the elevator, ignoring a few employees who tried to catch his attention. A quick wave was all he could manage, urging them to email him instead. As soon as he reached the street, he used his phone's navigation to locate the cafe Avery had referenced, a modest place tucked between two tall hotels. The sidewalk bustled with tourists toting wheeled luggage and executives juggling phone calls. Oliver dodged them with measured steps, scanning storefronts until he spotted the cafe's deep green awning. He found Avery at a small table by the front window, sipping iced tea. She looked up and smiled, a flicker of relief crossing her face. He slid into the chair across from her, exhaling softly. "How was your morning?" She shrugged lightly. "Not bad. I had a short hop down to D.C. and back. I'm off until tomorrow now." She paused, studying him. "You look like you've been solving major problems." Oliver chuckled, signaling to a passing server for a coffee. "Just the usual investor dance. We have a big meeting next week, and it's been tense." Avery nodded. "Does that happen often?" He considered it. "Frequently enough, but Garibaldi is more unpredictable than most, so it's a bit stressful." She leaned forward, stirring her tea with a straw. "If you need to go back soon, I understand." He reached across the table, giving her hand a quick squeeze. "This matters. I can carve out an hour, maybe more if you have the time." She glanced out at the pedestrians ambling along the street. "I do. Actually, I wanted to show you something." Slipping a hand into her tote bag, she retrieved a faded envelope. Her features turned pensive. "Mom wrote me a letter before she died. It's not the only one, but this is the one she addressed to you." Oliver felt his pulse spike. "A letter for me?" She nodded, passing it over gently. "I debated if I should give it to you, but I think it belongs in your hands. Mom insisted I could choose when or if to deliver it. She never had the chance to send it herself." He swallowed against a lump in his throat. The envelope bore Cassandra's neat handwriting, with Oliver's name in careful cursive. He turned it over, noticing a small red sticker of a bird in the corner. Cassandra had always adored nature motifs. His chest tightened at the memory of her youthful idealism. "Do you mind if I read it now?" he asked. Avery shook her head. "Please do." Oliver slid a finger under the flap, heart thudding. The single sheet inside was yellowed slightly, as though kept tucked away for months or years. He unfolded it and began to read. Cassandra's words spilled forth in a gentle cascade. "Oliver, I hope this letter reaches you one day. I've carried regret about not telling you of our child, but I made a choice I thought was best for both of you. I never wanted you to feel trapped or obligated, especially with your ambitions taking flight. Please believe I never doubted your capacity for love. I only doubted my own ability to share that burden with you at the time. I wanted Avery to have a mother who was steady, a father who was unstoppable even if he was far away. Know that I admired you more than you realized. My hope is that someday you'll forgive me for the lost years and find it in your heart to accept her. She is a bright soul, a reflection of all the best traits I saw in you. May you both discover the bond fate once hid. With gratitude and affection, Cassandra." His hands shook by the time he finished. Emotion clogged his throat, and he momentarily shut his eyes, letting Cassandra's message wash over him. That gentle, earnest tone revived memories of the late nights they'd spent joking about business articles. An ache of longing gripped him. He swallowed hard, opening his eyes to find Avery watching him, concern etched on her features. "You okay?" she asked softly. He nodded, blinking back the moisture that threatened to spill over. I'm just overwhelmed. She wrote so kindly about me, even though I vanished from her life." He stared at the letter again, absorbing each cursive line. "She saw our separation differently than I did. I always wondered if I'd done something to push her away, but it seems she left to protect me from responsibilities she thought I'd resent." Avery pressed her lips together. It haunted her. She sometimes wondered if you would have stepped up. But once you became so successful, she said it confirmed her choice. She didn't want to derail you. He exhaled shakily. If I'd known, maybe I would have pushed my ambitions aside, or at least made space. He folded the paper gently, tucking it back into the envelope. I wish I could tell her that now. Avery reached for his wrist, holding it lightly. In a way you can. Living differently from here on out might be your way of showing it. Oliver nodded. Thank you for letting me read it. I'll treasure this. He slipped the letter into his jacket's inner pocket, feeling as though a missing piece of his past had finally been returned. The server brought his coffee, and he took a sip that scorched his tongue. He welcomed the sting, grateful for the distraction from tears that threatened to fall. They remained in the cafe, conversation drifting toward gentler topics, Cassandra's favorite movies, small anecdotes about Avery's childhood that Oliver had never heard. He learned how Cassandra used to decorate their tiny living room with homemade sketches, always trying to feed Avery's imagination. In turn, Avery heard more about Oliver's early attempts to build a tech startup without losing heart whenever an investor rejected him. The more they shared, the closer they seemed, forging a bond from fragments of memory. An hour slipped by swiftly, and Avery checked her watch with a rueful sigh. I should probably head back to my hotel soon. I promised a co-worker I'd go over some scheduling changes with her. Oliver nodded, though he hated seeing her go. Let me walk you out, he offered. They stood, weaving through the tables until they reached the sidewalk. The busy midday crowd had thinned slightly, leaving them with enough space to linger near the curb. Avery glanced down. Are you all right? The letter, I mean. Was it too much? He shook his head. It was exactly what I needed. Hard to read, but it felt like Cassandra was speaking to me from the past, giving me permission to move forward. Avery gave a small, understanding nod. Let's keep going forward then, she whispered, leaning in for a gentle hug. Oliver returned the embrace, breathing in the faint scent of her shampoo, feeling the unexpected gratitude of paternal connection. His voice came out soft. Thank you, he said, for sharing everything. She stepped away, smiling a little sadly. I'll see you soon, right? Soon, he repeated. She disappeared into the flow of foot traffic, her figure merging with the tide of people and bright storefronts. Oliver stood there, absorbing the swirl of Manhattan midday. The letter's words replayed in his mind, a bittersweet echo of Cassandra's unwavering faith. A wave of resolve coursed through him. No matter how complicated the future might become, he wouldn't hide from it. He gently patted the pocket holding the letter, then hailed a taxi back to his office. The ride gave him time to reflect on what Cassandra had hoped for, and on how Avery's strength might guide him. When he arrived, he found a few messages from Paula, each flagged urgent. He dialed her back, half bracing for more corporate headaches. She answered immediately, tension evident. The Garibaldi Group wants an extra meeting this Friday, she announced. They say it's crucial they see the numbers in person before next week's formal presentation. Are you available? Oliver almost sighed, but then he steadied himself. I'll make myself available, he said. Have them meet me in our main conference room. Let's finalize a time. Paula sounded relieved. I'll confirm. Also, they hinted they might need direct assurances from you. I hope you're prepared. I am, Oliver said firmly, setting the phone down. The old him might have bristled at the pressure, but he felt a strange clarity now. He refused to let corporate demands overshadow his personal journey, yet neither would he sabotage everything he'd built. Both fatherhood and leadership mattered, and he would tackle them in tandem. Stepping into his office, he removed Cassandra's letter from his pocket and placed it carefully in a drawer where he stored personal keepsakes. The next hours would require a flurry of strategic planning, but each new challenge felt a fraction lighter, as though Cassandra's words and Avery's presence had anchored him. There was no going back, but forward seemed promising, especially if it meant sharing that path with the daughter he'd finally found. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like, and share with friends. The Garibaldi Group representatives arrived at Cunningham International's towering glass headquarters promptly on Friday morning. Oliver had prepared meticulously, hoping to soothe their concerns. His team had assembled reams of data and crafted a polished pitch deck, rich in updated market research. Yet a subtle knot still twisted in Oliver's stomach. He understood these investors were not merely checking boxes, they were weighing his every gesture to gauge whether he was fully committed to their partnership. Paula Quinn led the visitors, a trio of smartly dressed executives, into the spacious main conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered sweeping views of the city. A long, gleaming table stretched the length of the space, flanked by plush chairs. Oliver stood at the head of the table, posture as straight as ever, determined to radiate confidence. He extended polite greetings, shaking hands one by one, and directed them to their seats. Light refreshments waited on a side console. "Shall we begin?" he asked, his voice carrying the crisp authority for which he was famous. The Garibaldi reps exchanged quick glances, then nodded. Oliver launched into his presentation, clicking through slides on a large screen. He spoke of market trajectories, upcoming product launches, and the robust demand forecast. At times, Paula chimed in with clarifications. The tension in the room gradually eased, replaced by an attentive hush as the visitors scribbled notes. One of them, a silver-haired gentleman named Christian Ames, finally leaned forward, folding his hands on the table. "Mr. Cunningham, our concern stemmed from your recent cancellations and rescheduling. We value agility, but we also need stability in these uncertain times. You can understand our wariness." Oliver met his gaze, refusing to blink. "I do understand, and I assure you, nothing is more important to me than seeing this partnership thrive. My schedule has been hectic, but our focus on growth has not wavered." He kept his tone measured, careful not to betray any defensiveness. The meeting lasted over an hour, winding through projections and projections of projections, every possibility examined. By the time Oliver escorted them out, the atmosphere had thawed considerably. Christian Ames even offered a faint smile. "This is what we needed," he said. "A thorough rundown and your personal commitment. We'll reconvene next Wednesday as planned. I'm feeling more optimistic now." Oliver thanked them, shaking hands once more before they vanished into the elevator with Paula. After the doors slid shut, Oliver released a silent breath of relief. He retreated to his office, perched at the edge of his chair, and stared at the array of spreadsheets spread across his desk. He had salvaged the situation, at least for the moment. Yet, as he shut his eyes, he found his thoughts veering toward Avery again. He'd been juggling late-night phone calls all week, but each time they exchanged texts or squeezed in a short conversation, he felt more grounded. A buzz from his phone startled him. He checked the screen. A message from Avery. "Just wanted to say hi. Heading to the airport soon, on a flight to Miami. Back in a couple of days." His chest tightened slightly. He dreaded her leaving, even briefly. But that was her job, he reminded himself. She'd built a life he barely knew. "Safe travels," he typed. "Let's do dinner when you're back." He paused, then added, "Hope you have a smooth flight. I'll miss you." It felt bold to say, but he meant it. He waited. A few seconds later, the phone vibrated with her reply, "Miss you too. Talk soon." Sighing, Oliver pocketed the device. He knew he had to attend to more Garibaldi prep, but his concentration had frayed. Eventually, he forced himself back to the day's tasks, disappearing into spreadsheets for hours. It was only in the late afternoon that he emerged again, summoning Paula to hash out final details for the big presentation next week. Paula entered with a slim tablet in hand. "So they seemed appeased this morning," she said, glancing up. "But do you think we can finalize an agreement by Wednesday?" Oliver nodded. "We have a good chance. They just need reassurance we're dedicated to this. It might not close that exact day, but we'll be in the right place." Paula eyed him, a question hovering on her lips. "You've never seemed uncertain in negotiations before. Is something else on your mind?" His immediate instinct was to brush the question aside, but then he hesitated. Patricia had worked for him for years. Paula had been by his side for nearly as long. If there were a handful of people in the company he trusted, Paula was one of them. He set down a pen he'd been twirling between his fingers. "Actually, yes. It's personal. I don't want to go into great detail, but I have a daughter I just discovered." Paula's eyes flickered wide. "A daughter," she echoed quietly. "You're sure?" He nodded. "She's grown, in her 20s, a flight attendant. I never knew she existed. Her mother decided not to tell me. We reconnected by pure chance." A bittersweet twinge pinched his voice. Paula seemed momentarily stunned. She stood there, tablet clutched against her blazer. That's a big discovery," she murmured. "So you're trying to establish a relationship now?" "Yes." Oliver exhaled. "It's new and wonderful and terrifying. I've canceled some business obligations to see her, and that's why Garibaldi got rattled. But I refuse to back away from her, not again." A softness entered Paula's eyes, though she maintained her professional posture. "I didn't mean to pry. Just wondered if you were okay." Oliver offered a small smile. "Thanks for understanding. It's complicated, but I'm determined to make it work." Paula nodded, stepping back toward the door. "I'll finalize these slides. If you need anything else, just say so." She left with a measured click of heels, leaving Oliver with a sense of relief at finally acknowledging to someone on his team what weighed on him. Once Paula departed, Oliver found himself alone in the stillness of the late afternoon. The sun cast long shadows across the office, painting the shelves and furniture in golden light. He rose to stand by the window. From this vantage, the city's sprawling blocks reminded him of his constant drive to conquer new markets. But now he felt a parallel drive, to protect this newly discovered bond. He spent the weekend tying up loose ends for Garibaldi, constantly checking his phone for any text from Avery, who was busy working flights between Miami and Chicago. Sunday evening brought a short exchange. "All good here, Dad," she wrote. The word Dad caused his heart to skip, no matter how many times he saw or heard it. He texted back a simple "stay safe," feeling a bit helpless across the miles. Finally, Monday dawned with Avery's arrival back in New York. He'd asked her to come by the office mid-morning for a brief lunch. She arrived, suitcase in tow, looking travel-worn but excited. "Just dropped off my crew bag at the hotel," she explained. Oliver greeted her in the lobby with a warm grin. The staff at the reception desk looked perplexed, but Oliver didn't mind. He guided Avery to his office, letting her settle onto the leather couch. She kicked off her shoes with a tired laugh. "I've been on my feet for hours." "Relax," he said gently, settling beside her. "Let's just rest here a moment. Then we can get lunch." She nodded, leaning back, eyes drifting over the art on the walls. "How's the investor drama?" she asked. Oliver rubbed his neck, a dry chuckle escaping. "We have a key meeting in 2 days, but I think it's manageable. And you? Flight was good?" She shrugged. "Busy cabin, but no major issues." She hesitated, meeting his gaze. "I was thinking, maybe I'll take a couple days off after my next rotation." I'd like some real time with you if that's okay. Oliver felt a surge of gladness. That's definitely okay, he said softly. We could even get out of the city, go upstate, maybe find that hiking trail we talked about. Her eyes brightened. Really? Your game? He smirked. I made a promise. If you're free, I'd love to go. We can rent a car, drive up one morning, spend the day exploring. Avery nodded eagerly. I'll confirm my schedule. This will be great. They sat, musing about possible routes to Bear Mountain or Harriman State Park until Oliver's phone buzzed for an internal meeting. He glanced at the screen, annoyance flickering across his features. I'm sorry. Work calls, he said. She shook her head, yawning. No worries. You do your job. I'll survive. Maybe we can grab that lunch when you're free. He debated, then rose, grimacing. Let's say I'll be out in a half hour. Hang here. Rest if you want. She flashed a wry grin. Just don't let anyone find me napping on the couch. Oliver laughed. I think it's fine. He left, heart lighter. Meeting with a junior manager about some supply chain challenge seemed trivial after spending a few minutes with his daughter. Nonetheless, he navigated through the discussion, adopting his usual direct approach. The manager left satisfied, or at least determined to implement solutions. By the time Oliver returned, Avery was dozing lightly on the couch, her arms folded beneath her head, breath rising and falling steadily. He paused, quietly watching her. A swirl of affection and regret tightened his throat. He'd missed so many years of moments like these, the quiet, everyday instances that bond a parent and child. He gently touched her shoulder and she stirred, blinking up at him. Sorry, she mumbled, sitting up. Didn't mean to crash. He smiled, feeling an odd tenderness. You're fine. Come on, I'll take you to lunch now. You deserve a real meal. She nodded, slipping her shoes back on, smoothing her hair. They left the office arm in arm, ignoring a few curious glances from staff who'd never seen Oliver so casual with anyone. He took her to a sleek cafe 2 blocks away, ordering salads and artisanal sandwiches. They spoke quietly about her flight experiences, about his upcoming investor pitch, and the time she spent in Chicago after Cassandra's passing. At one point, the conversation turned to the future. Once I finish this flight rotation, she said, I might request to stay based in New York a bit longer. That is, if you don't mind having me around more. Oliver felt gratitude surge inside him. I'd love that. A gentle hush cloaked the cafe, broken only by espresso machines whirring and low chatter from other patrons. Avery's eyes shone with cautious hope, and Oliver realized how fragile this dynamic still was. Yet every new conversation felt like a step further into a genuine father-daughter relationship. He reached across, tentatively brushing her hand. I won't push, he said quietly. But I'm here whenever you need me, whether it's help with your schedule or just someone to talk to. She gave his hand a soft squeeze in return. Thank you, she whispered, eyes glistening. It means a lot. They finished lunch, stepping back onto the bustling city sidewalk. He walked her to a nearby subway station, where she planned to return to her hotel for well-deserved rest. Before she descended the steps, she turned, gaze earnest. Good luck on Wednesday with that meeting. I know you'll handle it. He smiled gently. I appreciate your confidence, and I'll let you know as soon as we nail down a day for that hike. She grinned back. Yes, I'm going to hold you to it. Then, with a small wave, she disappeared into the station, leaving Oliver standing in the swirling mass of midtown foot traffic. He inhaled, letting the crisp air fill his lungs. The tension of balancing corporate life and this new personal bond hadn't vanished, but it felt more manageable now, like the city's own symphony, chaotic yet harmonious. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like, and share with friends. By Tuesday evening, Oliver's office had settled into a hushed lull. Most employees had gone home, leaving only a skeleton crew in the cubicles. He stood at his window, watching car headlights line the streets below. Tomorrow was the day he would meet again with the Garibaldi group, presumably ready to secure their final agreement. Despite the magnitude of the impending negotiations, his mind kept drifting to Avery. Their brief lunch had underscored a deepening connection, one he feared might be as delicate as blown glass. He rubbed his temples, exhaustion tugging at him. Typically, he thrived on pushing himself, but everything felt heavier now. He had poured hours into refining the pitch deck, ensuring no weakness would give the investors pause. Yet a persistent ache in his chest reminded him that building trust with Avery mattered just as much. She was flying out again soon for another short trip. He had only a handful of days to prove he was serious about being in her life. He sighed and turned away from the window. The crisp slides for the Garibaldi presentation lay neatly stacked on his desk, awaiting final review. He double-checked them, scanning bullet points about profit margins and product expansions. Each statistic was precise, each projection robust. Setting them aside, he shut down his computer. Sleep beckoned, but he knew his mind would churn well past midnight. In the corridor, the silence magnified the echo of his footsteps. When he reached the elevator, he paused, recalling the times he had left this building near dawn, fueling himself with nothing but ambition. So much had changed in only a few weeks. At ground level, the night air was cool on his face. He considered heading to his penthouse, but the thought of another solitary evening weighed on him. Instead, he pulled out his phone and tapped Avery's number. She answered after 3 rings, sounding surprised. "Hey, everything okay?" He could hear bustling noise in the background, perhaps the hum of an airport lounge. "Yes, I'm fine," he said. "Just wanted to hear your voice. Where are you?" A soft laugh drifted over the line. "At LaGuardia, waiting to catch a short flight to Boston. I'll be back in 24 hours. Oliver found a bench near the curb, ignoring the swirl of taxis and pedestrians. "You're busy," he observed quietly. "I don't want to distract you." Avery's tone turned gentle. "You're not. I was just thinking about you anyway, hoping tomorrow goes smoothly." He felt a flicker of warmth. "Thanks. Means a lot," he said. "Are you okay? Not too tired?" She made a thoughtful sound. "A bit tired. But that's my life for now. I'm managing." The urge to say something fatherly, like urging her to rest or offering help, threatened to tighten his throat. "I won't keep you," he finally said. "Stay safe, and I'll let you know how things go. Then maybe we can talk about our hiking trip." Her voice brightened. "Deal. Good luck, Dad." He closed his eyes at the word Dad, letting it echo in his thoughts. When the call ended, he stood, suddenly aware that he was smiling into the darkness. Despite the tension swirling around tomorrow's negotiations, he felt a steadiness he couldn't quite explain. Avery believed in him, at least enough to call him father. He returned to his penthouse and tried to unwind with a single glass of wine. The city lights glimmered through panoramic windows, a silent chorus of possibility and risk. Eventually, he turned in, forcing himself to trust that tomorrow he would be ready. Morning arrived in a swirl of suit jackets, printed decks, and last-minute adjustments. Paula cornered Oliver before 9, delivering an update. The Garibaldi team was on schedule and planned to arrive just after lunch. He poured himself another coffee, scanning the final slides for typos. Outside, rain spattered the windows, streaking them with shimmering trails. He felt grateful for the somber weather, certain it would keep distractions minimal. By noon, the entire executive circle had gathered in the big conference room. Fresh pastries, fruit trays, and bottled waters lined the sideboard. Oliver reviewed each talking point in his head. Around 12:30, the visitors arrived. Christian Ames led the group again, followed by two new faces wearing tailored suits. They exchanged pleasantries, then settled around the long table. "Thank you for joining us," Oliver began, forcing composure. "We've streamlined our materials based on Friday's discussion. Let's pick up where we left off." A hush spread over the room as he advanced the presentation slides. He spoke firmly, highlighting year-over-year growth, unveiling charts that projected a lucrative future. Paula assisted, offering clarifications. Meanwhile, the two new Garibaldi associates murmured to each other, eyebrows raised at certain figures. Oliver's nerves flared, but he kept his outward calm. When he finished, Christian tapped a pen on the table. "This is impressive," he said, voice measured. "I see clearer synergy than before. Our main question remains. Are you fully devoted to shepherding this initiative over the long haul?" Oliver straightened in his seat. "Absolutely," he replied, letting conviction resonate in his tone. "You have my personal commitment. Cunningham International is prepared to invest the resources and strategic focus necessary for sustained success." One of the new associates, an older woman with sharp eyes, nodded slowly. "Then let's discuss terms. Our board wants a seat in oversight, plus a seat on your advisory panel. We won't consider a purely financial investment. We want a voice." Paula glanced at Oliver, who nodded, flicking to a specific slide. "We can accommodate that. We expected you'd want some direct involvement. Page 19 covers potential governance structures." They dove into the details. For the next hour, the conversation seesawed between cautious optimism and pointed interrogations. The group dissected every clause. Oliver felt like he was navigating rapids, one misstep away from jeopardizing the deal. Yet he maintained steady composure, buoyed by an unspoken confidence. Perhaps fatherhood had given him a deeper sense of purpose. At last, Christian signaled for a halt. He exchanged glances with his colleagues. The older woman nodded tersely. Then Christian turned to Oliver. "We believe we can move forward, pending final review by our attorneys. We'll need a few days. Assuming no unforeseen issues, I think we have a partnership." A silent wave of relief washed over Oliver. He remained outwardly poised, but inside he exhaled a thankful breath. "We're pleased to hear it," he said. "Let us know if you need anything further." Handshakes followed, along with courteous farewells. Paula escorted the visitors to the lobby while Oliver sank into a chair. The tension drained from his limbs. This was the break he'd anticipated for months. Securing the Garibaldi deal would fuel the company's next big leap, from expansions in Europe to possible forays in Asia. Paula returned, grinning. "They look satisfied," she said, gathering her notes. "Congratulations." Oliver stood, crossing to the windows. The rain had stopped, revealing a strip of bright sky on the horizon. "Thank you, Paula. You did a lot to prepare for this." She shrugged in her polished manner. "You were the one in the hot seat." "Nice work. I'll get the formalities started right away." He gave a nod and she departed. Alone at last, Oliver checked his phone. No messages from Avery. She was likely mid-flight or resting. He felt an urge to share the news, to tell her he'd succeeded, that his professional life wasn't crumbling. But he'd have to wait until she landed or texted him. After tidying the conference room, he headed back to his office, where he found a small mountain of emails. He skimmed them quickly, but each corporate request felt less pressing. The monumental negotiation was done, or close enough. Some hours remained in the workday, but he could not muster the old fervor. Instead, he opened his drawer and withdrew Cassandra's letter, running his fingertips over her flowing script. He thought back to the vow he made to Avery, that he would remain present and honest, no matter how intense business became. Now, he had proven that success in the boardroom did not require sacrificing personal commitments. The knowledge emboldened him. He left the building in late afternoon, phone in hand, strolling with measured steps. The clouds parted, revealing sunshine that glimmered against the wet sidewalks. Steam rose from street vents, weaving through the crowds. Oliver found himself at a quiet cafe tucked beside a bookstore. He ordered a simple espresso and sat by the window, letting the city's subdued bustle pass by. A half hour later, his phone buzzed. He saw Avery's name flash across the screen, and warmth spread through him. She texted, "Landed. How did everything go?" He typed back, "We nailed it. Deal's practically ours." A reply came quickly. "I knew you would. So proud of you, Dad." His heart did a small flip at that last word. "Thank you. Are you free to talk later?" She responded, "Of course. Call me tonight." Placing the phone on the table, Oliver sipped his espresso, gaze drifting to the bookstore's display of new releases. A father, a businessman, a man who was finally learning he could be both. He felt an inexplicable sense of gratitude, certain that life had granted him something precious. Outside, the sidewalks sparkled with possibility. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The next few days passed in a whirlwind for Oliver, punctuated by the steady hum of his regular duties at Cunningham International and the undercurrent of anticipation for Avery's return. On the evening after his triumphant meeting with the Garibaldi Group, he sat in his penthouse with the city lights twinkling beyond the glass. All around him, the sleek furnishings reflected his success. Yet for the first time he realized these glossy surroundings felt incomplete without the warmth of human connection. He scrolled through the messages on his phone, smiling at the brief conversation he and Avery had shared earlier. She was back in New York by the weekend, and as planned, they would finally go hiking upstate. He found it surreal that such a simple outing could fill him with more excitement than any business venture had in years. On Saturday morning, Oliver rose early and packed a small duffel bag with water, a first aid kit, snacks, and an extra jacket. He'd arranged for a rental SUV so they could comfortably leave the city behind. Avery arrived outside his building in casual jeans, her hair tied in a loose braid. Her eyes gleamed with eagerness as she hopped into the passenger seat. "Ready?" she asked, arching an eyebrow playfully. He nodded, feeling a gentle flutter in his chest. It was as though they were heading out on a grand adventure. Father and daughter forging a memory that should have existed years ago, but, by some stroke of fate, was happening now. When he eased the car into the slow trickle of weekend traffic, Avery flicked on the radio, humming to soft music. Oliver's heart lightened with each mile they put between themselves and the skyscrapers. A couple of hours later, they reached the trailhead in a leafy part of Harriman State Park. The morning sun angled through tall trees, flickering across the gravel parking lot. Avery hopped out and stretched. "It's beautiful," she breathed, scanning the forest canopy that rose in muted greens overhead. Oliver grabbed the duffel from the back, slinging it across his shoulder. He felt a faint rush of nerves. He couldn't recall the last time he'd done anything more strenuous than a treadmill workout, but as Avery looped her arm through his, he realized it wasn't the challenge that mattered. It was doing it with her. Birds called from somewhere deep among the branches, their voices weaving a tapestry of natural sound he'd almost forgotten existed. The trail began gently, winding among pines and maples, with the occasional root jutting across the dirt path. They fell into an easy pace, side by side, occasionally pausing to admire small pockets of sunlight illuminating patches of ferns. Avery snapped photos with her phone, grinning as she captured Oliver in candid shots. He laughed, half embarrassed, half proud. "Don't expect these to look too heroic," he teased, stepping around a protruding rock. She smirked, pointing the camera his way. "Please, I'll make sure your legacy is well documented. The unstoppable CEO conquers nature." Her playful banter kindled an affectionate warmth in him, reminding him that a father-daughter bond could be spontaneous and relaxed, even if they'd arrived at it later than most. About halfway along the trail, they reached a scenic overlook, a rocky shelf extending out, revealing sweeping hills and a glimmering lake in the distance. Avery let out a small gasp. "Wow," she murmured, stepping toward the edge. Oliver joined her, letting the view settle in his chest. Sunlight danced on the water far below, while a light wind rustled the trees. For a moment, neither spoke. There was an unspoken acknowledgement that these were the types of vistas Cassandra might have loved. Oliver quietly wondered whether, in some intangible way, she was sharing this moment with them. Eventually, they dropped their packs on a flat rock and took a seat. Avery pulled out 2 bottles of water, handing one to him. "This is exactly what I needed," she said between sips, cheeks flushed from the mild exertion. "Flying city to city gets disorienting sometimes." Oliver nodded, leaning back on his hands, the stone warm beneath his palms. "I get it. My entire life has revolved around traveling for business deals, and I wonder if, in chasing each success, I missed the simple joys, like a view like this." A soft breeze ruffled Avery's braid. She gazed at him, her expression thoughtful. "Mom always said she admired your drive, but she worried it wouldn't leave room for anything else. Now that I'm older, I understand how hard it is to balance, but I'm glad you're making space for me." Her voice nearly cracked on the last word. Oliver's chest tightened. "I'm done with letting people slip away," he said gently. "You and I, we have a chance to build something real, no matter how late it started." She nodded, brushing away a tear that had formed. "I'm looking forward to that," she whispered. Then she stood, extending a hand. "Ready to keep going? I hear there's a small waterfall not far from here." He took her hand gratefully, rising. "Lead the way." The rest of the hike passed in a sun-dappled blur. They navigated a few steeper slopes and eventually heard the soft rush of water. Avery laughed when she spotted the trickling waterfall, tiny but charming as it cascaded over mossy rocks. She kicked off her shoes to dip her toes in the cool stream, giggling at the sensation. Oliver followed suit, shoes and socks peeled away, letting the cold water lap around his ankles. A simple delight, one he'd never have tried alone. He leaned against a boulder, arms folded, listening to Avery talk about her next flight schedule. She'd requested an extension in New York to spend more time with him, an offer that made his heart soar. Mid-afternoon brought heavier clouds, hinting at possible rain. They retraced their steps to the trailhead, comfortable in the companionable silence. As they reached the SUV, Oliver checked his phone, a reflex he couldn't quite break. He saw a new text from Paula. "Garibaldi's legal team is finalizing terms. Looks like it's a done deal. Congrats." A small jolt of triumph coursed through him, but it was quickly overshadowed by a deeper gratitude that Avery was here. He showed her the screen. She beamed at him. "That's amazing, Dad. Now you can breathe a little easier." He smiled, glancing at the wooded horizon. "I already feel like I can, thanks to you. You showed me there's more to life than back-to-back deals." She patted his shoulder, then hopped into the passenger seat. "Let's head back before we lose daylight." On the drive home, the sky opened in a gentle shower. Raindrops pattered on the windshield, but neither seemed to mind. They talked about small things, new restaurants Avery wanted to try, the possibility of her renting a modest studio near his building, maybe adopting a cat. Oliver suggested she consider letting him help, at least until she found her footing. She hesitated, clearly unaccustomed to paternal offers, but eventually relented with a grateful nod. "We'll see," she said softly. "It'd be nice not to do everything alone." They reached Manhattan by early evening, city lights shimmering through the drizzle. Oliver pulled the SUV up to Avery's hotel, where her next flight was scheduled the following day. She unbuckled, then swiveled to face him. "Thank you for today," she said. "It was perfect." He reached out, resting a hand over hers. "It was. Let's do more days like this." Nodding, she leaned in for a quick hug, her damp hair grazing his chin. Then she grabbed her bag and slipped into the lobby. Oliver watched her go, heart pounding with a mixture of joy and tender wistfulness. Back at his penthouse, he toweled off from the rain and made a simple dinner, grilled chicken and steamed vegetables. Though an in-house chef was available, tonight he felt compelled to do it himself, as if reconnecting with the simpler aspects of daily life. Afterward, he stood near his window, phone in hand. The city glowed with a million lights, but his focus was on a single contact. Avery. He sent a brief text. "Thank you again for the hike. You've helped me find something I didn't know I was missing." And soon her reply arrived. "Me too. Sleep well, Dad." Setting the phone aside, Oliver contemplated how swiftly life could shift. Weeks ago, he boarded a commercial flight thinking he'd lost nothing by living as a lone figure at the top of his industry. Now he understood just how incomplete he had been. A single encounter had broken open decades of hidden truth, yet somehow it felt like the beginning of a more authentic chapter. He looked around at the polished floors and modern art that once signified his accomplishments. They still held meaning, but now they merely formed the backdrop for a richer story, one that included family. He considered all that lay ahead: further conversations about Cassandra, possible friction as Avery adjusted to having him in her life, the balancing act between fatherhood and corporate demands. Still, he felt prepared. If these past days had proven anything, it was that his heart, once laser-focused on building an empire, could expand to shelter the daughter he had long missed. The challenges would remain, but so would the profound sense of hope. Eventually, he made his way to the bedroom, discarding the day's clothes and folding them neatly. Before turning out the light, he remembered Cassandra's letter tucked in his office drawer, her words urging him to accept the bond fate had hidden. He imagined she would be proud that he had not run from the truth. He switched off the lamp, sinking into the sheets with a soft exhale. Avery's laughter echoed in his thoughts, mingling with the rustle of wind in the trees, and for once, he felt content to let tomorrow unfold in its own time. You've liked this story. Please subscribe to our channel, like, and share with friends.